Hello, everyone. This is Michael Bean from Forio. We're going to start the webinar now. We have a lot of material to cover during our webinar in the next hour, so we're going to move through things fairly rapidly, and we have three people that are going to be talking today. I'm going to introduce them in just a minute here. But before we get started, I want to show you a little bit about how GoToWebinar works in case you haven't used it before. It's useful during the webinar if you just have everything in full screen mode. So you'll see this little control panel probably on the right side of your screen. It should look something like this. And this little symbol here, if you click on this little window symbol, then what it'll do is put the webinar in full screen mode. And that's generally the best way to see things. At the end of the webinar today, we plan to answer some questions. And if you have questions as either Jaime, Naren, or me are talking, just type them into this bar here, and then near the end of the webinar, in the last, say, 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be asking questions on your behalf to Jaime and Naren. So today, what we're going to do is, this is Michael, I'm going to do a quick example of Epicenter, just to kind of explain what kinds of things can be done in terms of producing simulations and other kinds of analytics applications with Forio Epicenter. Then Jaime is going to introduce the user interface builder, show how that works. That's a quick way to create drag and drop interfaces for your models in Forio Epicenter. And then the majority of our time is going to be spent with Naren, who's going to show this user interface library based on JavaScript, which is actually used by the user interface builder to create applications. So that's the path we're going to take through today, and then Q&A, of course, at the end. So let me just quickly jump into showing you an example of how Epicenter works. This is a simulation that we've been working on this past summer that's built on the platform, and it's all about determining the adoption of alternative fuel vehicles into the future. There's a starting page where you can set things up to define like what the adoption rate of various alternative fuel vehicles is going to be, and it looks at things like gas, electricity, diesel, and biofuel, etc. And then the vehicle types, which can be hybrid electrics, plug-in hybrids, or just straight-up electric vehicles. And you know, the idea here is that you can go through and dial up, say, various kinds of incentives, and maybe change things in terms of the number of charge points. And then you can create a run where you run this out to into the future, and then see, how things might change. And I can drill down into results here, and I can say, okay, here's the point at which gas-powered vehicles start to decline below 50% sometime in the next, say, 35 years or so, something like that. So this is a fairly straightforward interface. It has it's built in this case on Vensim as the engine, but we support other modeling languages and other kinds of technical computing languages as well, including Julia and Python. In the near future, we will be supporting, and by the near future I mean in the next 6 weeks or so, we plan to support other simulation languages like I think, for example, and Stella. And we also plan to support R in the near future, so those will be coming up. But what I'm going to do now is just pass control over to my colleague, Jaime, and Jaime is going to go through explaining a little bit about the UI builder and how to create interfaces that look like this alternative fuel vehicle simulation.
Hi, hello everyone. As Michael was saying, I'm going to demonstrate really quickly the UI builder, what we call the UI builder, and it's a facility within Epicenter to create interfaces and to start off the interface for your model or for your project. And to do that, I'm going to just build a quick interface for a Google Glass sales simulation model. And it's a fairly simple model. It just kind of predicts or analyzes sales and revenue and profit over time based on price, based on a price decision that the user sets. So this is the quick mock-up of what we're going to be building. So I'm going to jump right into it. This is for those of you who haven't seen the Epicenter, who don't have Epicenter accounts. This is kind of the main project interface for the Epicenter account, and one of the folders on the left side is the model, And in here, we just put the model, and the model file is called Google Glasses or glasses.bmf, and that's the Benzim model that drives this. There's a static folder which is gonna hold all the HTML and all the interface basically. And finally, there's this UI builder link, which if I click on it, it takes us right into the UI builder. I'm going to start, like, this is the main UI builder interface, and it's kind of divided into two parts. One main working area, and on the left we have the components and the properties for those components, and then kind of the interaction for those two things. And it works basically by dragging and dropping things from the component side into the workspace, and kind of configuring and typing and rearranging and making the layout of what we want to build. And finally, we go in and save and preview, and we upload the interface into the project and run it at the same time. Let me just get started here. So I'm gonna the first thing I'm gonna do is specify the model file, the name of the model that I want to run. And in Epicenter, there's the ability to run any number of models. There's no limitation on the number of models that you can have on the project, and you can have one page that runs one model and another page that runs another model. So that's why we have the ability to specify the name of the model. So I'm going to just put Google Glasses, which is the name of the model, and then there's this initial operation parameter as a page setting, which kind of sets up the in the case of Benzim, it kind of starts the game, or it starts the simulation, as opposed to being in the constant or the before start game in Benzim.
That's right. And so for that feature, Jaime, what happens is if you're using some other tool that's not, say, a system model, like say in Julia or Python, then you could put in the name of a subroutine or a function or something like that?
That is correct. So whenever we refer to an operation in Benzim, it's a defined set of operations like step and the start game and things like to operate the model. But then any other language like Python or Julia, this would be just a function. It would be just a function call, and we can say initialize, or we could say calculate, or prepare model, or whatever we want to call our function. Or maybe we don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by dragging a row into my workspace, and I'm going to drag a row just to kind of create a layout, a two-column layout for my page. And this automatically puts a two-column layout, and I can drag and like resize the columns, or I can add another column if I wanted to. In this case, I'm just gonna use a two-column layout, and about that sounds correct. So let's name our simulation, and this is going to be the Google Glass Sales simulation. And to make it a little pretty, let's just add an image, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go in here and copy the location of that image, and basically the properties for that image allows me to specify just a URL for that image.
And I noticed you already stored that in this interface file, right? So in the static file, that image existed already.
That is correct. Yeah, I kind of pre-uploaded that image into my static folder, and I have access to that image basically. But this could be any image that is on the web, or like on many other site, or that you have within your project. Right? And now let's add a little bit of text. And notice that I'm just kind of dragging and dropping things around, and I can relay out. I can take like the text, and if I wanted to put it here, there, I could. But here, I just want to put it below the text, below the image. Right? And I'm going to put some introductory text about Google Glasses, and this is something that appeared in a press release, I think, from Google. So we're just going to use that text for now. And now let's get into the meat of the simulation. So The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the decisions and the inputs for the inputs for the model that we call decisions, and I'm going to drag this decisions control. And this decisions control allows me to specify several variables to make decisions about. So if I go to the settings of that component, of the decisions component, then I have a space to specify model variables, and I can specify as many as I want. I'm just going to specify one, which is price. And as soon as I finish typing type and getting out of that little box here, then notice that I have a price variable now on my table. And this corresponds to the price variable in the model, right? This is gonna, whatever we're gonna type here, that's gonna be sent to the model in the variable price. Now I'm gonna add a button to advance my simulation and to control the simulation. So let's say I'm gonna say advance, and for this, remember we talked about the model operations. Buttons generally execute actions, so that means calling a function or calling an operation on the model. In this case, to advance the sim, the operation is step, and I'm going to say step 1 time step. And then this, of course, like has all the meaning in Bensim that it regular has, like the steps can be different than time and all that. Right? In this case, one step is one time unit. So that's all the inputs I need for this sim, and I'm gonna now start putting some outputs so I can see some numbers moving and some decisions. So I'm gonna say I want to know like the current year, current year of the simulation. And this is just a label. This does absolutely nothing, but I'm going to drag a variable here, and this variable is going to have, represent that value. And I'm just going to bind that variable or that component to a variable in the model called time. And those of you who know Bensim, time is a native variable in Bensim, which is the array of all the time steps that are in the model. In this case, the flow.js, and Noreen is going to talk more about that in a few minutes. When you bind it to a variable, it's just going to show the last value of that array, that series of values. So now we know which year we're on. Let's put some other component, which is a results table. And in here, it has more or less the same concept. I'm just going to type a bunch of variables here that I can that is going to be bounded. They're going to be bounded to the model, and then we're going to see the results from those. So let's say I'm going to put price, sales, revenue, and profit. And these are all variables in the model. These are all corresponding variables in the model. Now let's make it a little prettier and a little better. And we're going to add another nested row in here to kind of lay out the charts that I want and kind of separate them correctly. So I'm going to I have these two charts here, a column chart and a line chart, and we're always kind of working on new components and new things, so that in the future are going to start popping up on here. So let's drag a column chart for this case, and I'm going to put sales here. The charts right now have, you can bind the y-axis, which is the actual value that you're trying to chart, to some variable, and then the x-axis or the categories that you want to display on the x-axis to time. So I want to show the years on the x-axis and then the values of sale on the y-axis. And I'm going to do that for a couple of other variables. Let's say I'm going to do revenue here, revenue over time, and I'm going to add another row to my little grid layout, and I'm going to say and I'm going to say this one is going to be profit.
That sounds right.
Profit. Profit over time.
Yeah.
And lastly, we're going to add another one. Oops, there, here. And we're going to add another one, which is performance over time. Okay, and I think we're ready to test it out. And let's see if I didn't make any typo. And I click save and preview, and that publishes the application into Epicenter. And when I say view, now I get my simulation. So this automatically instantiated a model and started the model, and I'm right now on 2015, and I have some values, and if I start making decisions about price, then I can start running the simulation. So if I say, now my next price is going to be 500, now I have the next year, and I advance time to the next year, and I can change the price. Let's put some 800, and let's see what happens. And apparently it didn't go that well. Let's lower a little bit the price and see what happens. That sounds all right. And somehow my sales started to decline a lot. So apparently it's coming to the end of the lifespan for that.
The life cycle, yeah, exactly.
So and this simulation is just up to 2020, to year 2020. So that's the end of the simulation, and that's how you build a quick UI in 10 minutes.
Very nice. Yeah, so that's what we want to get 10 minutes or so for taking a look at how to do a quick user interface with Epicenter using the UI builder. And this is our next generation of our platform. This is actually the third generation of the Forio platform. And one of the things we wanted to do with this platform is be able to provide a path forward for people who maybe start with this, but then want to do more sophisticated things. If you want to, like, for example, there's a lot you can do with this, obviously, that, as Jaime's illustrated, but there may be times when you do want to do fancier things and want to dive into more detail. And there's two things that support that. One is the way that we've written this UI builder tool is that it permits, that it is creating HTML that's pretty clean. It's the code underneath it is code that you can look at, and it actually is following good practices for developing HTML and JavaScript code. And as a consequence of that, there's this opportunity to, once you've done something like this, if you're wanting to transition to doing sort of a higher level of production values and things and have more control over the design, you can move on to doing stuff in with a JavaScript library. And so now our colleague Naren will be jumping into showing how you can extend this using JavaScript and our flow.js library. Naren?
All right. Hi, guys. This is Naren. All right. So here we see the simulation Jaime just created with the UI builder. So what's interesting about the simulation is if you look at the source, you can see that it's fairly clean, as Michael just pointed out. But also you would note that this has no JavaScript defined in locally. So how does it actually talk to the model, and how does it get data back and forth? That happens if you look at the bottom, this library called flow.js. So throughout the rest of the talk, I'll be talking about flow.js, what it is, what it can do, and how it ties in with work you'll be doing. So let's talk about flow.js. So flow.js is a data binding framework. It's a framework designed to connect your HTML to the cloud. We define cloud here to be Epicenter APIs, but you can define your own APIs later on if you're more advanced going forward. It's designed to be easy to use. The idea is that if you know HTML, you know flow.js. You can connect to your HTML to the model and start talking. And if you know JavaScript in addition to that, you can do really powerful things with flow.js. So it's designed to be extensible, configurable, framework agnostic. You can use that with any other UI frameworks like Backbone or Angular. And it's modeling language agnostic. So you can define your model in Vensem, which Jaime just demoed, or Julia, or any other language, or Python. And then the UI code is going to work and behave exactly the same. So how does it work? So flow.js works by hooking up attributes in your HTML to a series of channels. Channels are basically transports which talk to the API. And then it also translates this data to a series of converters. And I will go through what each of these highlighted things mean for the rest of the talk. Let's talk about attributes first. So if you know HTML, this looks familiar to you probably. You have just a text box, you have input type equals text and the value equals 200, which prints the number 200 on a text box. That's nice. That's a typical text box. But what if you have a model variable you wanted to print out the value of here? Then what you would do is just take the attribute you have right now and prefix that by typing data-f before it and say I want the value of price here, and that's it. So if I look at it right now, so I see the price is 500 and I see f dash value equals price. This is actually behind the scenes going to the model, getting the value of price from the current model you have, taking the value and putting in the UI. And you did that just by prefixing the string called data-f in front of your attribute called value. And this doesn't have to be value. Any HTML attribute, you can prefix data-f to it, and that will become a hook to the model. Like for example, I showed you price earlier. So I have this div below that where I just say the title is data-f-price, which means if I move my mouse over it, I can see the value of price is 500 right now.
Oh, that's interesting.
So any HTML attribute you can think of, it will work with data-f. So what I just showed for is just one way. You can get data from the model to your UI, but that's just part of the story. You want to send data back to the model as well. So that's where two-way binding comes in. So for two-way binding, Forio has defined our own attribute called f-bind. And if you f-bind on anything, it will do it two-way. First is it's going to get the value of the price from the model and put it here. And secondly, whatever I type here is going to go back to the model and be saved. I'm telling you that, but it doesn't show anything. So let's see how we can prove that. So here I have the same code I had earlier. But I have the input. Now I'm printing out the exact same thing I had on top below that. So if I type price as 300 here, you can see the thing on the bottom changes. So what it's actually doing is going to the model, setting the value of price to 300, and then the UI in the code here is getting the latest value of price and putting that in the UI.
So it's doing the round trip. It's
doing the round trip.
From the user interface to the server somewhere in the world, and then maybe calculating. In this case, it's just returning the same value.
Exactly.
And then showing it. Okay, cool.
So that works across, every attribute you can think of. Like for example, like I have, like in the previous example, I had a text box and a div below that. Here I have a text box, a radio button, and a select. They all hooked to price. So if I change it here, this changes. If I change it here, that changes, and so on. So really, data-f-bind is smart enough. So any element you have, if you type data-f bind as an attribute on it, it's going to work somewhat the way you'd probably want. So let's see what we can do with that. So I mentioned data-f-bind is smart enough to figure out the context and what it needs to do. So here I have this attribute called using that by data-f and saying, and hooking that to the variable called price. So what that means is if I type in 0 here, the button gets disabled and I can't click on it. If I type in anything besides 0, like say 250, it's going to get enabled again. So that happens if I have this disabled class. To illustrate a little bit more further, I have this class called price here. It's, and then I can, if I choose the price called 0, it's going to be hidden because I have this class which hides it. If I choose anything else, it's going to show. So you can see just with two-way binding and just a combination of different attributes, you can hook up some pretty powerful conditional statements in your HTML. Maybe you don't want to show the, I have this hooked up for price equals 0. Maybe you don't want to show the button if price is negative, which we will show later. But really, it can do a lot of powerful things with this. And also, attributes are just not for just variables. As Hemi mentioned earlier, your models can have variables and operations. Operations are basically functions in the model. So by default in JavaScript, if I do on-click and give it a function, it's going to call a function in your JavaScript. If you do data-f-on-click and then give it a function name, it's going to call a function in your model. So this is a Vensim model. I'm printing out the current value of time here. I'm doing f-bind here, which gives me two-way binding, which is really pointless here. It's just one way. But once you get in the habit of using f-bind, you don't really have to worry about like, hey, what attribute do I use here? use f-bind, it is probably going to work. So now if we click on the advanced button, you can see the time is changing. So this is actually going behind the scenes to the Vensim model, stepping it once, and then printing the value of the current time here. So just to summarize it, attributes or annotations on HTML, I can specify, I can prefix the data-f to make it talk to the model. The default attribute is data-f-bind, and their attributes are configurable and customizable, which I'll show what I mean by that later on the line. So, so far what we've just seen is getting data from the model and putting it back, which is fine. That's most of what a simulation is. But sometimes you want to do things with the data before you print it out. For example, you want to format it, and that's where converters come in. So converters are basically a series of functions or pipes which transfer data from one form to another. Like for example, here you can just see they're taking this thing called price and running it through this number format called this number format, which basically saying taking the raw value of price in the model and then formatting it this way. Flow.js comes with a few default converters. Number formatting is one of them, but it's really easy to add your one, which I can again show later. And converters are chainable, configurable, and customizable. So what does that mean? So here we have the same example we had earlier, where we have the input on the top and the output on the bottom. Here we are using the pipe syntax to send converters to it. So here I'm formatting price as dollars, and here I'm formatting price as a number with 2 decimal points. And you know the binding still works. So if I do 250 here, the number on the bottom is going to change, and the formatting is carried over. So I just typed in 250, not $250. So it formatted my input for me and also my outputs. And you can also define your own formatters. I mentioned Flow.js comes with a few default formatters like number formatting or maxes or mins or things you would typically do. But if you have a custom case of your own, it's really easy to define your own formatters. So here I have this formatter called flip, which is basically going to take the value of this and then basically reverse it around. So I have the value 500 here. So so if I type in 344, it's going to change it to 443. That's because I have this input which is bound to this number format, and then the output which is bound to this converter called flip, which I just defined here, which is just reversing the string. So converters are also chainable. So putting together the last two slides. So we defined a number format earlier, and then we're flipping it. So we are saying here, you take the value of price, you flip it around, and then you convert it to this number format. So if I type in, I don't know, 123 here, it's going to flip it around to 321, and then format that with a number. And formatters can work together with attributes to do really powerful things. We saw this example earlier where we had this input which says if 250, then show the button. If it's 0, then hide the button. And we did that by specifying the special class saying if the value is 0, then don't show it. That works in this case. Like if you just want to hide it, if the value is 0, that's fine. But if you want to do more powerful things like saying hide this if the value is less than 0, or hide this if the value is greater than 500, then there's no lot we can do with it unless you want to define your own classes for every possible number there. So, but we can use attributes here with converters to make that more easier to use. Here, let's look at HTML first. So here I still have a variable called price, but now I'm piping that to this converter called toggle. So toggle, if you look on the bottom, it's basically a converter which says if value is equal to 0, then hide it, else show it. And here, since you're doing the conversion, here if you could say like if value is less than 0, then hide it or show it or something like that. And because you have your own in Java, it's a one line of JavaScript, because you're defining your own thing, you can really customize it to whatever suits your specific example. Like for example, you may want, in your case, you may want not price to be greater than 1,000, in which case you would say if it's greater than 1,000, don't let them submit.
So that's something like if you wanted to avoid like negative prices, for example.
Exactly.
You use that. All right.
So right now I have the syntax for price, piping that to this thing called toggle, and then registering that. So this syntax is fine if I'm just doing this one thing. But if I am doing that for a big form at the bottom, this gets a little bit wordy. And we can do better than that. So I mentioned earlier you can define your own converters. Where we do converters.register toggle. Can also define your own attributes. So here I'm registering this attribute called toggle. So toggle is going to take the value of price, and then depending on the value, if it's 0, then it's going to hide it, else it's going to show it. And in the HTML, it's a lot cleaner. It's f-toggle. Toggle is of course not a custom. It's not a default HTML attribute. It's something you're making up. So flow.js that gives you the power to basically make up your own HTML for whatever makes sense for your case. And it's going to behave. Behave is going to be exactly the same if you do it this way or if you do it the slightly more verbose way. It's really whatever syntax you prefer, and then whatever suits your use cases the most. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to actually show flow.js in action. So here, we saw Jamie's example with the UI builder. So this works. I can enter numbers here, and I can advance the simulation. But what we want to do is a bit more than that. What if we say we want to show an error message of prices less than 300 here? Or let's do that first. Let's see how that works. So to do that, I would need to go into Epicenter and then log in to edit the file. So let me do that here. So this is Epicenter. This is the UI we will be using to upload your files and keep track of your model. You can see here there's a folder called model, which has the Google Glasses model we just used. We have this file link called UI builder, which is what Jaime used to build the UI. And then we have this link called static, which is the link to all your files. So let's look at index.html. So this is the file which has been generated by the UI builder. And the file itself is not that big. It's what? 60 lines of HTML. And it's loading flow.js, right? So the first thing we can do is, let's say, let's go back to the UI so we can look at it side by side. All right, so I have my UI on the right and my code on the left. So the first thing we want to do is, let's say we want to throw an error of price is less than 300. So you would do that by going to your HTML, find out where the advanced button is, which is probably on the bottom. Let's see.
There it is, right there. There.
So there you go. Okay. So I'm just going to say I'm going to have an error message here. I'm going to say this error message is going to be something like, let's say, please enter price greater than 0. Okay. So I have this basic there with the message saying please enter price greater than 0. But I only want to show this error message when the price is actually less than or equal to 0. So how do I do that? Can do that by defining your own converters to it. The first thing you want to do is say that this is going to be hooked to data-f-bind, which is equals price. So the first thing you want to do is saying like this condition is based on this variable. And then what you can do is you can define your own converter. So we want to define a own converter basically, which is called show if it's positive, show this error message if it's negative. So I'm doing that here. So let's see, let's drop that here. So I'm defining my own converter, which is basically saying show this error message if the value is negative. So the price by value is an array by default since you have many steps in your model. So I'm taking the last value of the step, seeing if it's less than 0, then adding a class called error, if not just hiding the error message. So then I can pipe my price variable to this converter I just have here. And then we also just want maybe just have a style with this, if it's an error, then show that in red. Okay, so what we're just to summarize what we're doing here, we have this table which is an error message in it. We are binding that value of price. We are having our own converter here which says if price is negative, then return this class, and then actually this should be attached class, and then we are going to be attaching this class whenever the price is less than 0. So let's see.
Save.
Sorry.
Save.
Yeah. So let's save it and see how that works. All right. So I'm going to save it here, and then and refresh the UI on the left. It's saving there, and then oops. Give me 1 minute here. I mean, I've actually deleted the index.html file. So let's create it one more time.
Okay.
I'm going to go into the static, click on new, add file, trying to call it index.html. Luckily, I have Amy's code stored somewhere here, so I can just copy paste that. And then I'm going to save it. All right, let's save this again. And then, okay, now it's saved. Let's see if that worked. Okay, so okay, now we have the UI here. I see a price here. I find our price of 300. We are fine. Find our price of negative 300. Should see error message saying enter price greater than 0. So that worked as, and if I connect my error message, then it goes away. If you're building a live simulation, you probably also want to hook up the disabled format, disabled data attached disabled to that advanced button. So you can't actually click on the advanced button until it's actually greater than 0. But for now, this illustrates the purposes.
It sort of illustrates it, yeah. That's cool.
And then let's see what else we can do with this. So here I have the value of sales, right? So let's see what if I want to have a value called peak sales, which shows the maximum value of sales. Typically, this would be things you might want to do in the model, but the idea with flow.js is keep your model clean. The model does only what it needs to, and things like summing it up or finding the max value of things, you do that in the UI. So let's see how we would do that. So here I'm going to go back here to my HTML. I'm going to click on Edit. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna add a new input. Well, no, it's not actually not input, it's a new output. I'm gonna call it peak sales. And then I want to do f-bind sales. So if I do this right now, it's going to show me the final value of sales, which is not what I want. I want to show the peak sales. So you can again do that by defining your own converter. So I can define my own converter called, let's say, max, which is going to return the max item and max of all of the sales arrays. So then I can just say this. So I'm going to go in here, add a new script tag. So the script up here is pretty simple. I'm just going to return a new converter called max, which is going to take an array of sales values and then just returns the max sales. So I'm going to save this, refresh my UI here. And I probably broke something. It saves the variable in the model at one.
Yeah.
Let's see if sales is what I want. I'm going to save this here. Okay. So and then once I have the value of sales here, and then if I change this to 600, It's going down. So the sales value works. So I need to pipe that into the Mac. I'm going to more strict to the bottom just to make sure it makes sense. Okay, let's see if that works. So now if I change my sales just to 600, my sales go down, but my peak sales doesn't change. If I change my price to 300, you can see that peak sales is still 6292, which is the highest so far. And then I can keep going, and it's going to behave the way it's going to show the maximum value of sales.
So what it's taking then, it's getting an array of the sales, because what Vensim in this case, because we're using Vensim as the model engine essentially on the server, it's providing the sales array back, and it's just calculating each time. Is that right?
It's printing sales array back, and then you're just finding the maximum of sales.
Okay.
Actually doing it here.
Nice. Okay.
So that's basically how you would define a UI with flow.js.
Just a quick question? Can you do another pipe or format that number?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Sure.
Yeah, we have some of
that.
Be nice to see the commas in there or something. Yeah, that's good.
All right. So here we have revenue, which is a really, really big number. Let's say we want to format that into something which is a bit nicer. So let's see where revenue is. Click on edit.
No, but I was saying the peak sales. Like, can you format the peak sales also?
Sure. Let me find peak sales, and then I want to say I'm going to type that to a number formatter. Let's just say what's a good number formatter? Is 0.0. Sure, can try that. S0 is basically the short number format.
So short number format. So put like K or M or something like that behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, 5 million.
Yep.
It's a nice round number. Good.
And we obviously can apply that to all these other things which are show the raw numbers right now.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. So so going back to flow.js. So finally, yeah, that's pretty much flow.js. So flow.js is it's on GitHub right now, so you can go check it out yourself. We have fairly good documentation for how to use it, and you can always write to us with any questions you may have.
All right, terrific. So it's about a quarter to the top of the hour, 15 minutes to the top of the hour right now, and we have a few questions that have come up during the webinar, and if other people have questions along the way, so we can answer those. So I get one question here that is, and I understand that a lot of people on this call today are Simulate users. By the way, for those of you who are Simulate users, the way to think about Epicenter is kind of like the next generation of Simulate. We had to change the name of the platform, unfortunately. If we didn't have to, we would have called it the Simulate 2.0 or something like that. But the reason that we did that is because now that we support these other languages, and we support Python, for example, and Julia and R upcoming and things, you can do more with the platform than just do simulation. So obviously, we still support simulation. We still support sort of the core packages that we have with Simulate. But you can do other things that are not really simulations, for example, like optimization or machine learning problems and things like that. So it extends beyond that, and we thought that keeping that name as Simulate would be confusing to some of the new customers who maybe don't do simulation. So that's why we have this new name for the product at this time. But as a consequence, someone here has asked, is there a separation between preview and publish like Forio Simulate has? And in Simulate, our previous generation platform, the way that we worked is when you created a UI using the Flash-based UI tool that the previous generation had, you could preview it before publishing it. And we don't have that feature actually in the same way, and there's a specific reason for that. So let me illustrate that for you, and I'll take control back to Naren. Let's see here. Where am I on this list? There I am. Okay. Okay, so what I'm in right now into a Google Glasses account. You should be able to see this on the screen, and I have this set up. And you notice here there's something called Project Access, and it's set to private. So the idea with private is that when I'm building something like this, that only I, as an author who's logged into the platform, can see the work that I'm doing, that if someone from the outside tried to access the interface that I created, essentially access the URL through, or access the simulation through the URL, they wouldn't be able to run it. But I, as someone who's logged in as an author for this, I can go to this and actually run this by clicking this URL link here. So what the private access does is accomplish essentially the same thing as preview, but make it apply to kind of everything across the board. And also, by the way, one of the things that preview was limited to was just the sort of Flash-based stuff, whereas if you're writing an interface in some other language, like in this case, say, HTML5 with JavaScript and CSS and so on, you wouldn't be able to kind of control that preview access. So here now we're able to do that, and you can change that to being private or public here for access. And if you have public access, one of the options there is also to add password protection. So what you can do then, if you want to, you can have people who subscribe to your simulation or your tool, whatever it happens to be, doesn't necessarily have to be a simulation, and they can you can control their access through passwords or control it in other ways as well. So that's sort of a difference in the way this thing is structured. While I'm in here, I thought it might be worth just pointing out too a couple other features that are a little bit different in Epicenter than they were in Simulate, and one of them here is this concept of dedicated compute units. So in Simulate, the way the platform worked is we had some big BP servers. We had a cluster of them that hosted various simulations and forecasting tools and things like that, and everyone was kind of accessing this pooled resources, essentially, a portion of these pooled resources. In Epicenter, what we've done is we've said, well, each person, each user, essentially, each end user who comes into the platform gets his or her own kind of virtual machine online. So what you can do is you can allocate a certain number of compute units, which you can kind of think of as a computer. And you can say, if I want my application to run faster, you can allocate more compute units per session, or essentially per end user, and then the consequence will be that the simulation can run faster. And what's nice about that too is that if one person is doing something that's pretty extensive, is working really hard on things, it's not going to affect the way that other people. It's not going to slow other users down if they happen to be running the system simultaneously, because each person gets their own kind of virtual server in the cloud. So this is kind of a change from the way that it works with cloud computing versus kind of the set of shared resources and things. All right, so that was kind of a lengthy explanation of that. Let me see what other questions that we have here. We have one here. What optimization languages are supported, or do we need to code our optimization models in Julia? Okay, so you can use, there's a number, so within optimization, there's a number of commercial and open source solvers that are out there. So there's a variety of things. There's GPLK is one of them, I believe. There's another one called, well, anyway, there's like 6 to 12 different solvers that are pretty popular, and actually more than that out there. And what you need to do if you want to run an optimization with, or a solver with the packages, use one of those packages and use it alongside, say, Julia or Python or something like that. So, so it's the way you would control it is by running the solver through one of those technical computing languages. So to answer your question, do we need to code our optimization models in Julia? The short answer is yes, but you can also do it in Python or soon in R. But then what you would do is you would, there are libraries available in all 3 of those packages that allow you to connect in to both open source and commercial solvers. If you're interested in learning more about that, we'd be happy to answer more questions about that. So next question is there an easy way to convert simulation models to Epicenter? And yes, there is. Right now, what you need to do in order to get a VenSim style simulation model into Epicenter is to just save it as a binary file, which is, Jaime, is it .dmf, is that right? Thanks, I always forget that. So a .dmf file for VenSim. Very soon, we're planning in October of having the ability to also convert in, I think, in Stella models, and we plan to, there's a lot of changes that are occurring within the system dynamics simulation field right now in terms of packages and things, and as new sort of packages come out and capabilities, we plan to support those as well. So there's an extension there, and there are, right now, if you're a Vensim user, it's relatively easy to convert, and shortly it'll be easy to convert for some other packages as well.
Are we planning to support the Forio language?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. Thanks for asking, Jaime. So so we have, Forio has, as some of you may know, has its own modeling language, and we plan to support that as well in October. So perhaps not surprisingly, we plan to support our own language. What that means is you can move simulate models from simulate into Epicenter. A question here, does Epicenter support discrete event simulations? And the answer to that is yes. So the way that you get discrete event simulation support in Epicenter is by using some of these technical computing languages to support it. So to give you a concrete example of that, we were doing some things with Little's Law recently, which you can run as a discrete event simulation or sort of test it with discrete event simulation. And the way we did that was to use Python with a Python library that supports discrete event simulation. It was very easy to write. It was I think, a colleague of ours, Brian, put that together, and it's sort of like, I don't know, 20 lines of code or something like that. So we can support discrete event simulations currently through these technical computing languages, again, like Julia and Python and R. And our hope is in the future to support commercial packages too. The challenge with the commercial packages, we need to get partnerships going with those commercial providers so that we can host them on our server. If anybody on the call today is a commercial discrete event or otherwise simulation provider, we'd be happy to talk with you more about being able to support this. All right, let's see. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. And if we don't get to your question today, then we'll be able to get to your questions after this, and we'll answer them in a by email later on. Let's see. There's a question here. When it comes to multiplayer simulations, is there anything in Epicenter that makes it more suitable for this purpose than other alternatives, such as building an app on our own? What would you say is the selling point of, let's see if I can see the rest of Epicenter over other alternatives? Naren, I'm going to ask you this question, actually, just to see what you think about this. You're obviously, and actually both of you guys both Jaime and Naren develop multiplayer simulations using Epicenter or other simulations using Epicenter, and they have historically built them in Simulate. And so the question here basically is, why would I use this platform over just kind of coding my own multiplayer solution? It's at least how I'm interpreting it.
Sure. Basically, you get a few things out of the bat, like authentication and message passing. Like, for example, if someone sets a decision in one browser, you might get notified on another browser and so on. And it's also, you get a shared state of the, for example, if you're playing with player A versus player B, player A can easily access the same instance of the run player A does. And the other way around too. So if you have two playing with player A versus player B and then two other players altogether, they each will have their own virtual world and they won't interact and collide with these things. So there's nothing stopping you from doing the same thing with other languages. It's just like you get a lot of things for free if you do it with Epicenter.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's sort of building on what Naren was just saying about what you get sort of for free with that is also years of testing. So, we have multiplayer simulations. Some of our multiplayer simulations are played literally by hundreds of thousands of MBAs around the world every year, and some of which have been played literally millions of times at this point. And when you have something like that that gets used a lot, what happens is you get lots of edge cases that get solved for it, like, if you have firewalls in certain situations or your latency issues or, all kinds of problems that can emerge because of differences, say, with browsers and things like that. And so those are problems that we've learned the hard way over years of support for these things, for many years. And, as a consequence, have been the sort of the solutions for solving those have been built into the platform, and you can benefit from that essentially. Versus, kind of having to relearn those issues again, I guess, over time. Okay, we have another question here. Pricing for hosting. That may be a good way to wrap up here. Thanks, Elliot, for that question today. Let me see if I can find that on our site here. So let me just show you what I'm doing, actually. I just put my screen on hold. Okay, so here you can see our website. If you go to Forio.com, if you go to the main page here and go to Epicenter, you can go to pricing and see some of the details about this. And what you see here is yearly and monthly pricing. The key here is that the pricing is set for private and public projects is unlimited. Authenticated projects, what that means here is if you have a project that is password protected. So the idea here is that if you have password protected projects, which could be a simulation, for example, or some other machine learning tool or something like that, then you can have up to, for a small team, up to 1, a medium team up to 5, and a large team up to 25. And then this is the number of end users that can be accessing these authenticated projects over time here too. So this is basically the pricing for this. There's also an opportunity to increase the number of dedicated compute units that you can consume. And so you can buy extra dedicated compute units for these packages down here. There's sort of an explanation of how that works as well. So the pricing actually, we think, is going to be probably a little bit, is comparable to the way that Simulate is priced. But the idea here is that there's some flexibility. If you have something that's starting small with few users, but you think it might grow into the future and get lots of users, this scales more kind of according to the number of end users that you have versus, say, being charged a lot for extra capacity that you may not be using at the beginning here. So that's a difference. And in addition, I should point out that we do offer an enterprise license, which means that if you want to host this in your own organization and not have it hosted in the cloud, we offer a license where you can install it on your own servers, that sort of thing. So just to wrap up for today, I'd like to point out too that we have this documentation available. If you go into Epicenter, you can click on documentation support, and the documentation is pretty extensive, and we've spent a lot of time on it. We've had people dedicated to writing our technical documentation over really over a year now, and there's lots of details on how to get started and build projects and things. And in addition to that, there's support available as well that you can find online. So just to wrap up for today, if you have other questions, feel free to contact us at info@forio.com. And if you're interested in trying out Epicenter on your own and experimenting with these tools, you can do so right now, essentially, by going to forio.com/epicenter. All right, thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.